Gulf of Mexico, with its azure waters and golden sands, often conceals stories far darker than its shimmering waves may suggest. Nestled along its shores, amidst idyllic beachfront homes, lay the Cybers' residence, a picture of tranquility shattered by an untimely death. The Cybers' home was a beacon of affluence and stability, a place where neighbors would often gather for barbecues and holiday celebrations. Their reputation as community leaders almost made the couple too good to be true. But behind the veneer of their picture-perfect marriage, there were already a few cracks ones that would eventually split their lives apart. The scenic beaches witnessed whispered arguments, long silences at dinner parties, and the weight of secrets too heavy to keep hidden. That morning, tragedy struck the shoreline. It was quite early in the morning that Jennifer Cybers, daughter of Kay and Bill Cybers, called her mother on the phone. The phone rang and rang with no answer. With each second passing, Jennifer became more uneasy. Her mom never avoided calls. Something was wrong. Jennifer had always leaned on her mother for comfort, a constant in a life full of family turbulence. Hours turned into no response, and something told Jennifer this was much more than a missed call. Unsettling feelings had been there for weeks, a slight shift in the family dynamics between mom and dad, an atmosphere of unease that lingered around during her last visit home. The instant she stepped out of the house, she ran with all her might towards the entrance. The silence inside was deafening. Every step toward her mother's room felt heavier than the last. It wasn't just the absence of a response, it was the absence of life. Jennifer was shaking with anxiety as she walked down the hall to her mother's room. The creaking open of the door brought into view a sight that would haunt her forever. Kay Cybers lay motionless in bed. Her skin was pale, her chest still. Panicked cries pierced the house as Jennifer frantically tried to wake her mother, but Kay was gone. Jennifer screamed, and the sound reverberated through the walls, breaking the eerie silence that had enveloped the house. She did CPR on her mom and begged her to get up with shaking hands. Hysteria actually set in when she realized she had no hope of doing anything to save her. The lively, vibrant woman who'd been the centerpiece of their family lay cold and still, frozen in time. Her sobs turned into disorientation as she tried to grasp the reality of what she'd stumbled upon. The image of her mother's lifeless body would haunt her for years to come. Jennifer called the one person she believed could help. Her father, Dr. Bill Cybers, the county coroner. As a doctor, he was no stranger to emergencies, but instead of rushing home, Bill sent two of his assistants to the house. Jennifer's disbelief turned to frustration as she waited for her father. This man was supposed to have devoted his life to saving other people, but when his own wife's life lay in the balance, he came off oddly detached. The entrance of his assistants seemed almost impersonal and clinical. To Jennifer, who asked several times why Dad wasn't there, the silence had been deafening. His assistants, well-intentioned as they had been in trying to reassure her, deepened that surreal moment further. It was just another case for Bill to file away, another statistic in his career. Time ticked on. The minutes ticked into an hour. When the assistants came, they gave CPR, but it was pointless. At 10:18 a.m., Kay Cybers was declared dead. The pronouncement of death seemed almost a formality, a rubber stamp on a moment that had long since changed Jennifer's life. The assistants exchanged a glance, the professionalism barely cloaking the discomfort of the situation. One began running off forms with a pen while offering Jennifer a glass of water she couldn't bring herself to drink. Unspoken questions weighed heavily in the air, filling the space within her mind. Why hadn't her father acted sooner? Why wasn't he here now, comforting her in this moment of unimaginable loss? The news spread like a wildfire to Dr. Terrence Steiner, an experienced forensic medical examiner and an old friend of Bill Cybers. Death came to Kay Cybers a bit too early. She was only 52 years old. She enjoyed excellent health and had been in high spirits, as many said later. Steiner was shocked, but he became suspicious when he came to know that no autopsy was planned. Steiner had worked with Bill for years and knew him as a very precise professional, yet he felt that not seeking an autopsy bordered on negligence. A gut feeling of something being wrong just wouldn't leave Steiner. He remembered how Kay would come to all events in the community, laughing and full of life, and it just didn't seem right that she would be gone. Steiner's instincts told him there was more to the story, and he resolved to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But county coroner was a position in which convention was beside the point, and Bill Cybers had the power to dispense with it. And so he did. He declared his wife's death a heart attack, no examination, no second opinions. Steiner sensed something was off. He called the local authorities and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, imploring them to investigate. To Steiner, the bypassing of standard procedures was far more than a red flag. It was a screaming beacon of suspicion. Bill's position gave him an unusual amount of power, but it also placed him under a microscope. Steiner did not make calls to the authorities lightly. He knew what repercussions might come from questioning a colleague's integrity. Yet, his conscience would not allow him to remain silent. He spent hours compiling evidence and connecting dots, determined to ensure that Kay's death wouldn't be brushed aside as just another case. Agent Scotty Sanderson of the FDLE was tasked with uncovering the truth. His mission was clear: determine if Kay Cybers' death was natural or something far more sinister. Agent Sanderson was an accomplished investigator of very complicated cases and proceeded with a lot of caution to solve the case. He realized the stakes were high, as this was no ordinary case but an investigation involving one of the most respected men in the county. First, Sanderson started piecing together Kay's final hours, interviewing neighbors, relatives, and medics while underlining discrepancies in Bill's story. The deeper he dug, the more a web of secrets he found, each thread leading right back to Dr. Cybers. Sanderson realized he was dealing with a case that was as much about human emotion as it was about forensic evidence. His first stop was the Cybers' home. There he sat across from Dr. Cybers and listened as the coroner recounted the events leading to his wife's death. The meeting was tense, with every word Cybers spoke being scrutinized for hidden meaning. Sanderson noted the detached demeanor of the man who had just lost his wife. Instead of sorrow, there was a clinical precision in his words, as though he were narrating someone else's tragedy. Cybers described Kay's health history, but his account was riddled with vagueness. When Sanderson pressed for details, the coroner grew defensive. It was not so much what Cybers said, which put Sanderson on his guard, but what he did not say. There was something calculative in the deliberate evasion of the issue that put Sanderson's suspicions on high. But what Bill Cybers described next was anything but classic. When Sanderson asked about the syringe, Cybers said he'd thrown it away in the kitchen trash. Sanderson headed for the kitchen to retrieve it. Cybers stopped him. There was something that didn't add up as far as Sanderson was concerned. The syringe. Why would a syringe feature in a case of sudden cardiac arrest? The interaction became threatening when Cybers blocked Sanderson's attempt to retrieve it. It was one of those moments for Sanderson, no longer a regular investigation. It had now turned into a battle of wills. The discarded syringe had come to represent the murkiness of the case. Was this an innocent medical instrument or the smoking gun? He mentally registered to push harder and get to the bottom of what Cybers was desperate to hide. The case continued to get murkier by the day. An autopsy performed in Pensacola yielded no clear answers. Dr. Gary Cumberland, the pathologist, described it as one of the most puzzling cases of his career. Cumberland was no stranger to complex cases, but this one baffled even him. Kay's body did not show any overt signs of trauma, and the classic indications of a heart attack were absent. He did find small abnormalities, though, things that might indicate he had been poisoned. Cumberland spent many hours poring over the case file, consulting with toxicologists and re-examining his findings. His frustration mounted as he realized critical evidence was probably destroyed in the embalming process. It was like doing a jigsaw puzzle when some of the pieces were missing, and Cumberland knew the answers lay just out of reach. Without a cause of death, investigators considered a chilling possibility of poison. Could Kay Cyber's heart attack have been induced? If so, her embalmed body might have destroyed critical evidence. Poison introduced a sinister layer into the investigation. Toxicologists advised them on how such substances, like potassium chloride, could give the appearance of death from natural causes. Sanderson researched medical literature on properties of these agents and about their virtual detectability during post-mortem examinations. Traditional testing methods had been nullified by the embalming process, leaving very limited avenues to be pursued by the investigators. The team looked into alternative techniques and consulted with specialists across the country. Each lead brought hope, but the limitations of science balanced the scales in favor of the perpetrator, if there was one. Then rumors started surfacing about Bill Cyber's personal life. A whispered affair with a female lab technician reached Sanderson. Phone records showed hundreds of calls between Cybers and the technician, many late at night, one placed that very morning when Kay died. The affair exposed, the case moved from a medical mystery to a scandal. Sanderson pored over the phone records, tracing the timeline of calls to moments surrounding Kay's death. The lab technician, when questioned, appeared nervous, her answers evasive. The nature of their relationship became a focal point for the investigation, adding motive to the mix. A double life was revealed through the mid-of-night phone calls. To people in the community, it became a certain kind of betrayal that finally destroyed the illusion of the Cybers' immaculate marriage. To which Cybers said he did nothing wrong. Cybers denied doing anything wrong and said those were professional phone calls. The denial was calm too calm, and he would not acknowledge an affair, only feeding further doubt among investigators. Sanderson couldn't ignore the inconsistencies between Cyber's words and his actions. Friends and colleagues who were once loyal to Cybers began to distance themselves, their confidence in his integrity shaken. The walls around Cybers were closing in, and his defiance only deepened the resolve of those seeking justice for Kay. As the months of investigation mounted, a family torn apart by suspicion and mourning was unearthed. Kay and Bill's son, Tim Cybers, were barely holding things together. 1 year after his mother had died, he confided in his close friend, Kim Shiro. His words were haunted. Saddened, Tim consistently labored under the shadow of his mother's death. Everything he did was tinged with bitterness. He talked about a family that was broken, with secrets unbearable to endure. Kim would later remember how, in the months after Kay died, Tim became different. The laughter vanished, and an almost permanent sadness took its place in all his conversations. Tim would hint at something he was unable to tell, words wrapped in ambiguity, yet with deep weight. To the people who knew him well, his struggles were a tragic reminder of how deeply loss can cut. On a Sunday morning, Tim took his life. The sound of his voice on the phone with Kim, moments before the fatal gunshot, would echo in her mind forever. Tim's death sent shockwaves through the community, rehashing debates about the case and its impact on the family. Kim, racked by guilt and sorrow, reluctantly became a voice for justice, pushing investigators to keep pushing forward. Tim's final moments acted as a cruel, gruesome reminder of how big an emotional toll the case had taken from everybody who remained behind. His death instigated a sense of urgency that is complete and turns a cold case to a mission-like pursuit for truth and closure. The case of Kay Cybers has remained one of the most chilling and complex mysteries of our time, a haunting tale of love, betrayal, and unanswered questions. It sends some pretty clear signals about how fragile justice can be and the devastating ripple effect of unresolved loss. If you or someone you know has information that can shed further light on this case, now is the time to come forward. Even the smallest detail could give investigators and the Cybers family answers that have been eluding them for decades. Justice for Kay and closure for her family are responsibilities that belong to all of us. Be well informed, stay alert, and let this and similar stories spark us all for the defense of truth and accountability. Share this story and keep the conversation alive. Sometimes it only takes another pair of eyes to bring into the open what lies beneath. Andrea Cincotta, a 52-year-old resident of Arlington, Virginia, was cherished for her sweet and gentle demeanor within her community. Employed at the Arlington Library, she had a remarkable ability to brighten the days of her colleagues. By 1998, her son, Kevin Cincotta, had reached adulthood, and Andrea was filled with pride as she witnessed his growth. Simultaneously, she was experiencing her joy, having recently celebrated 7 wonderful years with her fiancé, James Christopher Johnson. Together, they were laying the foundation for their dream home, but fate had other plans in store for them. On the evening of August 21st, 1998, the day unfolded like any other for Andrea and James. She had arranged to dine with a friend before returning home to enjoy a movie night with James. As the clock struck 6 p.m. and Andrea had yet to return, James felt a twinge of concern, but chose to retire for the night, hoping to find her by his side in the morning. However, at 1:30 a.m., an unsettling feeling stirred within him. He noticed the closet door ajar and approached it with trepidation. Upon opening the door, he was met with the devastating sight of his beloved fiancée, Andrea Cincotta, lifeless. The Arlington County Police Department was promptly alerted, and the apartment on North Road Street was designated a crime scene. In a perplexing turn of events, investigators found no signs of blood or physical trauma on Andrea's body, yet the coroner later ruled her death a homicide by strangulation. As detectives scoured the apartment for evidence, they uncovered no indications of a struggle or forced entry. Naturally, James, as Andrea's fiancé, became the primary focus of the investigation, and under the weight of scrutiny, he faltered. What ensued was a police interrogation that would be remembered for its strangeness. After 3 days of questioning, James offered a vague admission. "It's all very hazy. Just an image. I see myself holding her and she slips out of my hands and she goes down to the floor. I fell on top of her. She hit her head on the desk." A wave of exhilaration swept through some of the investigators present. They believed they had secured a confession, sealing the case, or so they thought. However, other officers swiftly highlighted a critical flaw in James's admission. Andrea had succumbed to strangulation, not blunt force trauma. Her body bore minimal signs of injury, with scarcely any bruises to suggest such violence. James was engulfed in dread, fearing he would be implicated in the murder of his fiancée. To his astonishment, officers soon entered the room, informing him that he was free to leave without charges. They recognized the inconsistencies in James's confession and noted his inability to accurately recount the details of the crime scene. Despite the prevailing belief among some that he was culpable, the Arlington County Police Department had no choice but to release him. This decision ignited outrage within the community. Residents of Arlington were left in a state of fear, convinced that James had murdered his fiancée and evaded justice. Determined to seek accountability, Kevin Cincotta, Andrea's son, embarked on his investigation. Shortly after James's release, Kevin reached out to the Arlington County Police Department with a crucial lead. Just weeks before Andrea's tragic demise, a man named Bobby Joe Leonard had appeared at her apartment. Andrea had confided in Kevin and James that Bobby was there to remove her old computer. She insisted that the two were alone during the process, and the exchange was uneventful. Kevin urged investigators to scrutinize Bobby more closely, and upon doing so, they uncovered unsettling information. Bobby Joe Leonard was far from an ordinary individual. He had been released from prison mere weeks before Andrea's murder, having served time for assault and sodomy. This revelation sent a chill through the investigators. Bobby was summoned for questioning, yet he steadfastly proclaimed his innocence. In the absence of tangible evidence or a confession, the Arlington County Police Department found themselves unable to charge or detain Bobby, leaving him a free man. The year 1999 brought an unexpected turn of events when the Arlington Police Department received a distressing call. A woman was discovered fighting for her life, hidden away in a closet in Fairfax County, Virginia. Much like Andrea, she had been strangled, assaulted, and concealed similarly. Remarkably, this survivor identified Bobby Joe Leonard as her assailant. In 2000, the judicial system held Bobby accountable, ultimately convicting him of the heinous crime and sentencing him to life imprisonment. Investigators soon recognized the alarming parallels between this 1999 incident and Andrea's case from the previous year. Throughout the investigations, Bobby consistently proclaimed his innocence during interviews with the Arlington County Police Department, causing the case to grow cold. Yet Kevin, Andrea's son, clung to the hope that justice would one day prevail. His faith was rewarded in 2018 when Detective Rosa Ortiz took up the mantle. The Cold Case Unit revisited the case in 2013, meticulously reviewing the files and evidence. By 2018, Detective Ortiz decided to confront Bobby in prison, seeking any new insights he might offer. Upon entering the interview room, she anticipated resistance from the inmate. However, as Bobby began to speak, an unexpected revelation unfolded. For years, he had vehemently denied any connection to Andrea's murder, but on that fateful day in 2018, he confessed to taking her life in 1998. The plot thickened as Bobby disclosed that his actions were not random. He had been contracted for a hit. He recounted a chilling phone call from a man he believed to be Andrea's fiancé, James Christopher Johnson, who had offered him $5,000 to carry out the murder. Bobby accepted the contract, and shortly thereafter he invaded Andrea's apartment and attacked her. He lamented to Detective Ortiz that he had never received the promised payment for the grim task. In the wake of a startling confession, Bobby Joe Leonard and James Christopher Johnson were apprehended and charged with murder. In an unexpected twist, a jury swiftly acquitted James, reaching their verdict in a mere hour. The presiding judge expressed bewilderment over the initial arrest of James, questioning the rationale behind it. While James emerged unscathed, Bobby faced a far grimmer fate. When probed about his shocking admission in 2018, Bobby revealed that an inner voice urged him to reveal the truth. He felt an overwhelming need to confess to the harm he had caused and seek redemption for his transgressions. During his confession, he expressed deep remorse, extending apologies to the friends and family of Andrea. Ultimately, Bobby Joe Leonard was convicted of Andrea Sincotta's murder and sentenced to an additional life term to be served consecutively. Throughout the trial, Kevin delivered a poignant victim impact statement. "This crime didn't merely change my life, it obliterated it. I lost relationships, my emotional support system, and my entire family. The life I once knew is gone. I struggled to find a reason to continue living, but one thought sustained me: the need to uncover the truth about my mother so that I could finally grieve. Without understanding what transpired, true grieving remains elusive."
William Earl Moult, a distinguished 40-year-old gentleman hailing from Lantana, Florida, was known to his friends as Bill. He was a dedicated mortgage broker who, on the evening of November 7, 1997, chose to spend his time at a local nightclub. A man of few words, he maintained a low profile and departed the establishment around 11 p.m. Exhibiting no signs of inebriation, he made a call to his girlfriend, assuring her that he would return home shortly. Tragically, William never arrived at their residence. As time passed and concern mounted, his girlfriend reached out to the authorities to report his disappearance. The police promptly initiated an investigation, beginning with the nightclub where he was last seen. However, their search yielded no trace of William or his vehicle. They interviewed several patrons who had encountered him that evening, yet none could provide insight into his whereabouts after he left. Despite the relentless efforts of law enforcement and the heartfelt endeavors of William's family, his disappearance remained shrouded in mystery for over 20 years. In a remarkable turn of events in 2019, a local property surveyor from Lantana was perusing Google Maps satellite imagery when he noticed a vehicle partially submerged in a pond behind a nearby residence. This pond, situated in the 3,700 block of Moon Bay Circle within the Grand Isles housing complex in Wellington, Florida, had gone unnoticed for years. Upon making this startling discovery, the surveyor alerted the owner of the adjacent property, Barry Fay. Although Barry had resided there for 14 months, he had never observed anything amiss in the pond, even during periods of low water levels. He had dedicated countless hours to landscaping and cultivating pineapples in his backyard, yet the submerged car had eluded his gaze. Curious and determined, Barry borrowed a drone from a neighbor and conducted an aerial survey of the pond. The white car was unmistakably visible beneath the water's surface, a haunting sight behind his backyard. On August 28, 2019, Barry promptly reported his findings to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. Soon after, the vehicle was retrieved from the pond, revealing it to be William's white 1994 Saturn SL, with his remains discovered inside, bringing a tragic conclusion to a long-standing mystery. At the time of William's mysterious disappearance, the region was undergoing significant development, leading to the car remaining hidden amidst the construction activities. Intriguingly, this vehicle had been visible on Google Earth since 2007, yet it went unnoticed until recently. Many residents are still in shock that a car, along with a body, lay submerged in the pond for such an extended period. A spokesperson for the police conveyed to the BBC, "It is impossible to ascertain the events of so many years ago. What we do know is that he vanished without a trace, and now he has been found." While William's family may never fully understand the circumstances that led to his tragic fate, they can finally begin to find some semblance of closure.